For more on this story pertaining to the Ukraine, we speak to US Correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who joins us from New York. A major paradigm shift being witnessed in not just the relationship between Ukraine and the United States, but also a major shift in the relationship between the US, Europe, as well as Russia.
Calling it a seismic shift from Funda would not be underplaying what we are witnessing here. Just ask the Europeans that have gathered in emergency sessions in Paris, not only on Monday under the auspices of the French President Emmanuel Macron, but again today in Paris, talking to the European leaders that were not present in that earlier meeting, really trying to formulate a response from Europe, a response from the European Union. Remember, there are 27 members of the EU, and so sometimes it's difficult for that grouping to forge a unified consensus on what a response looks like to a president that has gone outside of the tradition we have seen over the last 3 years here, is in terms of being in lockstep, in terms of imposing sanctions, in terms of providing aid to Ukraine. It has been a partnership between the United States and the EU up until Donald Trump's inauguration. Let me just read you, Mfundo, what Donald Trump has just posted to Truth Social. Quote, a dictator without elections. Here referring to Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the Ukrainian president. Zelenskyy better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. In the meantime, we are successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something all admit only Trump and the Trump administration can do. Biden never tried, Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelenskyy probably wants to keep the gravy train going. I love Ukraine, but Zelenskyy has done a terrible job. His country is shattered and millions have unnecessarily died, and so it continues. What you're not hearing, Mfundo, from the US president is any criticism whatsoever directed at the Russian Federation, no criticism directed at Vladimir Putin, no criticism directed at the Kremlin, but criticism against Europe, criticism against Zelenskyy, and criticism against his predecessor, Joe Biden. Listen here to what Vladimir Putin said in reaction to the peace talks, the beginning of peace talks between the United States and Russia that were held in Saudi Arabia's capital, Riyadh, yesterday. Watch.
In general, the atmosphere during the talks was quite friendly. Our participants in the meeting told me there were completely different people from the American side. They were open to a negotiating process without prejudice and condemnation of what has been done in the past. At least in the course of bilateral talks, there was nothing of this kind. But they were tuned to work together and open for it. The goal and subject of our negotiations was a restoration of Russia-US relations. Does anyone want to be a mediator between Russia and the US? Probably. Those are excessive demands. The main thing in solving the most pressing issues, including the peace settlement in Ukraine, is that without increasing the level of trust between Russia and the US, it is impossible to solve many issues, including the Ukraine crisis.
So certain niceties being exchanged between the leadership of Russia and the leadership of the United States, something that we have not seen certainly under the previous administration and certainly not since the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Of course, we'll be marking the third-year anniversary of those developments on Monday next week, February 24th. But remember, Mfundo, this also follows the very different posture you heard from the United States Vice President J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Council conference in Germany earlier this week. Late last week. He said, the threat I worry about the most vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia or China. It's not an external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values shared with the United States. And of course, that didn't go down very well with European leaders who responded in a forceful way.
No, it's honestly quite interesting developments. But the one aspect that many are raising concerns on is just that here you've got a negotiation process that's underway to end the war, but this excludes the Ukraine. I mean, how does that then happen?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, the Ukrainians have been very clear, Mfundo. Volodymyr Zelenskyy has made it quite clear that you cannot take decisions about Ukraine without us at the table. This is why you're seeing the European leaders gather, as they have done over the last couple of days, to really formulate a response here, given what they know to be true is the future U.S. withdrawal from this Ukraine-Russia dynamic in Eastern Europe. And it is a complicated it's a complication that Europe quite doesn't know quite yet how to respond to. But certainly, even the Russian president, in remarks that we played earlier, in those remarks, he also made it clear that Ukraine would be part of the negotiations, and nobody is excluding Ukraine from that process, except, of course, the initial meeting between Russia and the United States in Riyadh earlier this week.
But then the statements by Donald Trump also add a different dynamic now, where there could be some within the Ukraine's own administration that would say they might not be the most neutral mediator in this instance.
That's an absolute fair point, right? The good faith mediation role of the United States is certainly something that the Europeans are grappling with right now, and certainly Volodymyr Zelenskyy is grappling with right now. I mean, Donald Trump just called Zelenskyy a dictator, but has not used a similar language to refer to Vladimir Putin, where perhaps that description would be more fitting, right? I mean, Mr. Putin has been in charge of Russia's government, both as prime minister and president, for a very long time. The point I think Trump is seeking to make here is that there have not been elections in Ukraine since the institution of martial law, because there is a war ongoing. There are missiles flying over the heads of Ukrainian citizens. And so certainly a very, very complicated pathway forward here. But certainly the posture from the United States has changed. And so you're going to begin to see Europe grappling with this in terms of how they respond to this. What will their posture be moving forward? But certainly daylight, it seems, between the United States position and that of Ukraine's government led by Volodymyr Zelenskyy here.
Sherwin, indeed a complicated pathway ahead. Thank you very much, as always, for that reportage. That was Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News correspondent.